Hey everyone, I'm Cameron from SpeedCubeShop.com, and today I'm going to be talking about a cube that actually made me love cubing again. Not to say that I didn't always love cubing, but it's a cube that actually makes me want to addictively solve it over and over again, the WeiLong version 9 ball core. And the other versions are okay too. So stay tuned till the end, and I'll be giving all of these three a final score that is built upon a few different factors that we talked about throughout the video, so definitely look for that at the end. With that being said, let's dive right in. So to kick this off, I will go ahead and just run through the specs of each of these three. So it does come in three versions. We have the ball core, currently only available with the UV coating, which is like a high gloss exterior scratch resistant finish, very similar to the PVC coating that we offer for cubes that are not already UV coated. We have the standard version, standard springs, and then we have the maglev version, which of course has the maglev, whatever you'd call it, core, I guess. Looking through the specs, the maglev is available with the maglev version, of course, and the ball core. The standard version has 48 magnets, maglev has 60, the ball core has 88 due to how the ball core is designed, and I believe it has corner to edge repelling magnets or something. What did you say that was?
Edge to core magnets?
Right.
So pretty much the opposite of corner to core magnets.
Yes, so it has those. The exterior finishes are currently only frosted for the standard and for the maglev, and the ball core is only available in the UV, which is kind of interesting, but I am not complaining. Size is going to be 55 millimeters across the board, and then the weights are 67 grams, 71 grams, and 76 grams, so all pretty close in weight, but when you do feel the ball core, which is the heaviest compared to the standard, which is the lightest, you can kind of feel the weight difference, but I think that because of how the ball core feels, it is not extremely noticeable, but then again, we're only talking about a few grams here. So as far as features go, these all come with MoYu's signature, tried and tested, dual adjustment system. It's pretty simple to use. You have your 9 clicks, which will adjust either the springs, the compression of the spring in the standard version, or it's going to be adjusting the distance between the maglev magnetic rings on the maglev and ball core version. The difference in the distance for the maglev rings is going to make the cube turn faster or slower, but it will also kind of play a little bit of a role in the corner cutting too, so you want to keep that in mind. While the customization is super easy to use, I was slightly surprised to not find adjustable magnets in any of these three versions. I personally don't really think the adjustable magnets are that necessary because I think that most people leave them on the medium or moderate setting anyhow, but considering this is MoYu's flagship and the WeiLong is pretty legendary, I would say, I'm a little bit surprised that they did not throw it in here to kind of compete with cubes like the Tornado version 3 and of course the GAN 13. But it might have been a cost thing, or they just couldn't figure out something that would work and not jeopardize some other part of the mechanism. Who knows? I was really pleasantly surprised to find these are all extremely durable. We often see that lots of people will yank on corners and corner twist either by mistake or purposefully, and they will actually damage their cube. We somewhat tried to break not these, but our other set of them, and it was not allowing us to pull out the corner piece, and corner twisting kind of aggressively didn't really seem to damage anything. So these were actually some of the more durable speed cubes that I have felt in quite a while. Some cubes like the GAN 13 feel great, but it's a little bit more fragile and just kind of like, it feels more like a toy. These are toys, I realize, but these just feel more premium and just they feel really solid and well built, so hats off to you, MoYu, on the durability. One quick note on the durability is that the ball core version is the most durable out of the three. For some reason, the corner twisting is the most difficult on the ball core, probably because of the ball core and the mechanism, whereas the maglev and the standard, they're relatively the same as far as the resistance it takes for a corner twist. Looking at the exteriors, I do like the MoYu color palette that they have kind of been using for the last however many releases. The blue is really nice and vibrant, which I like. Some of the lighter blues can be a bit hard to recognize when comparing to like fluorescent greens and stuff, but the color palette works really well. My only like mini gripe is that the yellow could be a little bit more yellow. When you're solving in low light conditions, I have pretty bad eyes, but it's kind of hard to sometimes tell the yellow from the white at a glance, whereas some cubes have more of like a mustardy or more of a pure yellow. That would be my only real complaint. The UV coating though, as always, looks absolutely fantastic. The high gloss finish is pretty spectacular. It feels nice, and it just really kind of enhances the vibrance of the colors, which is a major plus. As far as the feeling goes, I was actually really surprised that the WeiLong WRAM V9 is the first maglev cube that I actually really enjoy and would use kind of as like a main. It's really nice, it's fast, but with setup, it's not overly uncontrollable. So it is fast, it has less of a blocky feel compared to previous WeiLongs do, but it just feels really good and flows well. The standard version, same thing, nice feel, smooth, a little bit clacky. The ball core is by far my favorite though. With setup, it's smooth, it glides, it's a little bit clacky, but by far the sound is dampened, and it just flows really well and just has a nice sturdy feel to it. The maglev also feels sturdy, but the maglev and the standard do feel less sturdy, I think because of compared to the ball core, I think because of the ball core. I know my parents out there are always concerned about the sound and how loud and clacky these things are gonna be. So good news, the V9 is actually relatively quiet compared to some other SpeedCubes on the market. We just did a quick setup with some Martian lubricant, lunar, and stardust on these three, and it's nice and pretty quiet. It is a little clacky, especially on the standard and the maglev, but it's really not that bad compared to some other cubes that we were in the process of reviewing. So I would say that overall in the sound department, you'd be pretty happy with this. It is one of the more quiet SpeedCubes that we felt after setup. Speaking of setup, it's crazy how different these cubes feel out of the box. They're all insanely fast, namely the ball core and the maglev, to the point where they're not really controllable, they're a lot more clacky, they're a lot more loud, and honestly, the standard version is the one that felt the least different between setup, which kind of surprised me because the standard is sort of my least favorite, I think. It did benefit from setup, of course, because I don't think I've ever found a cube that doesn't get better with setup. But it just feels a little bit smoother and it glides a little bit better and is slightly more controllable. But the maglev, I mean, I went from not really liking it out of the box to this is, like I said, one of my favorite cubes. It is just, it's good. Like, it just feels right using this cube. But the ball core is just, man, this thing is, I don't know if it was the setup I did. I have it on the third or fourth click, depending on how you look at it. I think it would be technically the fourth click if you're going based off of how MoYu considers there to be 9 clicks. And man, the sound, it just, man, the sound, the feel, it is just good. Like this cube actually makes me feel like I'm decent at turning a SpeedCube. And you look at the solving footage, I'm getting like 10s, 9s on this. And yeah, it could be the scramble to some extent, but my times kind of fall apart and go back to the slower times they typically are when I use the maglev and the standard. So could be coincidence, but I don't think so. The ball core is awesome. One interesting note though, is that most maglev cubes kind of suffer from corner cutting. It's some level in my opinion. And these actually, I don't really feel like they do. They all corner cut very easily to the point where I almost don't realize that there's not a spring in here, because being an older cuber, I'm just used to there always being springs, and the maglev cubes at first weren't really that great at corner cutting, and it was a definite noticeable difference between the maglev and the standard versions. But I mean, honestly, I almost feel like the corner cutting it's definitely as good as the spring version. When you go back to back, you can sort of feel a little bit of a difference, but I don't know, it's pretty hard to tell the difference. So it's nice to see that the maglev technology is continuing to advance. The fact that this cube comes in 3 versions kind of bothers me a little bit. I don't like multiple versions of cubes, which I've gone on the record saying several times. I personally believe that the ball core version should have been the only version to have been released. They could have done it in a UV version, which we have, and a frosted version. Based on typical pricing, a frosted version would have been about $37.95 US, while the current UV one is sold for $42.95. The maglev version is good, and honestly, this could have stood on its own as well. I do think though that to remain competitive with other manufacturers, the ball core would have been the one to go with if they were picking between one. But the upgrade difference between the maglev to the ball core is far less than the upgrade from the standard to the maglev or the ball core. The standard, it's a great cube, don't get me wrong. If you pick one up, I'm sure you'll be really happy with it. It just doesn't really feel like it needs to exist, because this is the flagship cube, it's the WeiLong. So I think it'd be okay to not have a sub $20 price point for one of these versions. So even if they just released the ball core and the maglev, I think that would have been better than releasing all three, because the more versions you have, it's more complicated, there's more questions, and you feel like you have to try them all. So honestly, if you're gonna get one and you have the budget, get the ball core. If you're a little bit more on a tight budget, get the maglev. And if you're on a tighter budget and you really wanna try one, get the standard, or honestly, save up, wait for a sale, and pick up the maglev or the ball core. The accessories are relatively standard, really nothing too fancy. One difference is that MoYu has recently switched out to this kind of clear carry like storage box versus the old one that they used since the GTS 3, I think is when it debuted. And the funny thing is that the literature that comes with the accessories actually reflects the old packaging, but I'm assuming they made tens of thousands of those, so it kind of makes sense. But the storage box is nice. It's a little bit hard to use for some people. Like I've seen complaints online that the tabs are a little bit hard to line up, and I am pretty sure that at some point in the future, the tabs are gonna start breaking on people if they slam it together or don't have it aligned. We come with, the cubes come with a screwdriver, which is again, very standard. You get your dual adjustment tool with a spare gear ring for the dual adjustment system. And then you get some tension, like evenness pieces, which it's nice for the thought, but I don't know one person who actually uses the MoYu tension tools to try to achieve an even tension. I've tried it a few times in the past, and it is just still too subjective, time consuming, and just a pain to have to take the cube completely apart. So in the accessories department, they're good, nothing really too much to write home about. Talking about the literature, I already kind of touched on the accessory pamphlet reflecting the old box style, but on the backside it does still reflect how to use the tension adjustment pieces if you wanted to do that, and how to use the dual adjustment system, which is nice to include. It's pretty well written as far as the English translation goes, and you do get a solve guide as well if you want to use that, but I think most people should use the solve guide on our website or a YouTube video from someone like Jburn. So my last kind of point to go over is the packaging, which I really like. It's not overly big like some cubes, like I think it was the Chi Black Mamba V3. It's like this huge box with just a 3x3 in it. So these are nice. I really like the color palette. This kind of holographic text and cube is really cool. Again, it's just a simple box design. I do kind of think though that considering they went through the trouble to print a different lid for the different three versions, it would have been nice if they would have put an English description of which version is which, because if you're buying all three of them or you just have one of them, it might not be abundantly clear which version is which if you're a newer cuber or someone who isn't as familiar with the product. It looks like that in Chinese, they probably do indicate which version is which, because I'm seeing a lot more text there on the ball core versus standard. So they probably did it in Chinese. It would have been nice just to throw it in English as well, but not that big of a deal, just a small nitpick. But overall, the box is really nice, simple, it's a box. So to wrap up the video, looking at the total cube score, I'm calling it for these three, I have the standard version coming in at a score of 39, the maglev version 44, and the ball core at 48. And that's out of a total of 65 points. Pretty close between the three versions. I mean, it's a little bit more tricky when you compare three versions of the same cube, because there are a lot of similarities, like the accessories are all the same, the packaging is all the same, the exterior finish is mostly the same. So the scores aren't as dramatic between the others, but it's still kind of interesting to look at that and compare. So if you're interested at looking at the cube score and comparing to other puzzles, I'll have a link to that somewhere in the description down below. Anything else?
Rest in peace, the blocky feel of the cube. It's iconic blocky feel that they got rid of to kind of just mimic the almost like what could be like called the GAN standard, just being light, fast, and like kind of like this roundish feel to it.
Yeah, he's been going on and on about this whole...
I really like the blocky feel.
The blocky feel is nice, but we have the YS3M for that. Then the YS3M is blocky. Yeah. Like, it's like I'm holding a brick compared to this. So I tried a 2021 WRM, and I definitely like the V9 a lot more. So
I will say the performance is better. I'm not saying anything about that. I like the blocky feel of Cube.
hey, well, either way, these are an absolute slam dunk. I'm really glad that MoYu did release these because there was a little bit of fear that the YS3M might be the replacement for the WeiLong series. So fantastic cubes. You really can't go wrong with either of them, but you should definitely buy the ball court version. Hope you all enjoyed. Leave your questions in the comment section down below. Shop at SpeedCubeShop.com and check out more of our videos. Bye.